Hello, welcome to our Dads Central Canada launch webinar and our 10 tips for dads and those who support them. My name is Candace Shanks. I'm a Community Action Program for Children Training and Education Coordinator at the Saskatchewan Prevention Institute in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. I'm also a Director for Dads Central Canada, representing Saskatchewan, along with Rhiannon, who is in China. Introducing now today, Russell, who is Provincial Coordinator for Dads Central Ontario, which is now going to be Dads Central Canada. McLean, who is a Supervisor at Abbey Dads Program in Abbotsford, BC, and he is also a Director with Central Canada, representing BC. Before we get started, I will let you know that this webinar will run for not more than an hour and a half, and all of the lines will be muted. You can ask questions throughout in the Q&A box, and I'll ask the questions at the end of the webinar. Take it away, Brian and Jeff.
All right, thanks. So this is Brian, and thanks everybody for taking time today to be a little familiar with Dads Central Canada and to hopefully get some good information. Jeff, we've been talking about this for a while, and it's good to board on the same page here to be able to talk about these things. So I guess just a bit of the objectives and the agenda, just so everybody's up on what we're going to be doing today. I want to share a little bit about what Dads Central Canada is about and who we are. We're going to have a brief review of why should we even bother with talking about dads, like what's the deal about engaging dads and what does some research say. And then for our 10 tips for dads and practitioners, and just have a bit of a conversation around those things. And then, as I said, at the end we'll have some time for questions. And with that, so Dads Central Canada, I guess we can go on to the next slide there, if we can. Something that I guess we've been around for maybe a couple of years, talking about how to build the organization for father involvement across Canada. Dads Central Ontario has been a bit of a case for that. We've been around the longest, since the early 2000s, and used to be the Father Involvement Initiative Ontario Network. But right now, what we're focusing on and trying to make happen is to build this national voice for father involvement across Canada. And so we're building a network of representatives from every province and territory in Canada. We're now represented in BC, in Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, New Brunswick, the Yukon, Quebec. So we've pretty good representation on our little network, and so we're hoping that does continue to grow. The focus we have is really to be a best practice portal for understanding and engaging fathers. We want a place in Canada that people can come into that conversation. They can learn about resources, get training, build their own capacity to engage, but also to be a way to support fathers and mothers and families around what dads mean to those families and what dads mean to our community. So we wanted that kind of thing, and supporting local and provincial efforts based on, that are focused on engaging fathers. We're an organization that will run programs nationally. We don't have the capacity to do that, but we want to be able to support at local level things that are happening across the country, and that can be support through resources, through training, but even just helping to spread the word and learning from those programs that are successful and are running already. We'd like to hear those kind of things and just what makes a successful engagement strategy in different countries across Canada. And then we also see ourselves as being advocates for issues affecting fatherhood. So things like paternity leave, and there's a lot of discussion around that, and trying to have more political connections, and looking at maybe some of the different fatherhood that out there that we could be supporting and kind of raising the conscience about. that's kind of what Dad Central is about. And Jeff, I have some thoughts you wanted to share too about some of the things we're talking about today.
Great. Just in terms of introduction, my name is Jeff. My wife Chris and I have 3 kids. Braden is 15, Claire is 14, Jackson's 11, and this is something that is near and dear to my heart. Welcome to all of you across Canada. Good morning to you that are in the West Coast, and as we move east, I understand you're already well into the afternoon. Really pleased you could join us. Wanted to start out talking a little bit about some of the foundation of why we're doing this training and what is it built upon. What are some of the pillars that kind of anchor what we do? One that comes to mind is really this isn't primarily about dads. This really is about kids and the well-being of children. And so everything we do, everything we say today, and the programs we run or the ideas we put forth is all filtered through how does this impact children. And so that really is pillar number 1. This is about the best interests of kids. This is making sure the kids have quality of life and have the opportunity to really thrive. Pillar number 2 is this is by no means meant to take any energy or any resources away from the good stuff that's happening with moms. And I think all of us would agree there's lots of good programming out there, but there's room for lots more. And something we encourage or talk about doing for dads, we certainly don't want that impacting mom's services at all. Number 3, it's really about building dads' strength and capacity. And so what can we do to download skills to those dads so that they can kind of operate best that they can be, and give them the tools to thrive in their situations with their families. And number 4, and this one has really been a bit of interest to us. It's not necessarily about new initiatives. It's not about having a huge dads program move into town. And really for you dads that are listening, it's not really about totally revamping everything that you're doing and doing something completely different. 9 out of 10, it's about tweaking what's already working, some of the things that you've already got in play. For you practitioners, some programs that are already running, doing things a little differently, tweaking some of the the time frames or locations or the ways that you interact or you advertise that really engages dads and gets them to buy in. Brian, any kind of a story to start things off here?
Well, so what you're saying there kind of makes me realize how what we're talking about here, we have these 10 tips and we have these ideas, but really what's important for everybody to take away is that what was in urban environment in Toronto, where I've raised my kids, it will look very different than it will in a rural Saskatchewan. So what Jeff was talking there about, not that we're trying to talk about new things, we're trying to talk about principles and ideas that people can take and apply to communities and to the ways that they parent and kind of what their situations are. I really want this to be an encouragement to people to be thinking about how do these ideas fit for who they are as a dad, or what kind of work they do, what their communities are. And that's really you can't walk around telling everybody here are the 10 things to do. You got to do these things specifically. We want to be kind of sparking ideas for everybody to be thinking things through. Interesting. This is Father's Day week, in Canada and a lot of other countries, and it's a time we see more commercials. There's more conversations about dads. There's more Facebook posts and tweets that are going around. There's more dad videos. Some are good, some are not so good. But it's an interesting time that at this time of the year we really focus on dads, and there's a whole lot of opportunity to do that. And so that's one of the reasons why we thought doing this webinar at this time too is a helpful thing because we're thinking about dads, and it's a good time. So
absolutely, I agree. So let's jump into a bit of our material before we get to our top 10 list, which, as Brian said, is certainly not exhaustive, but is something that Brian and I discussed first of all, in our own lives as dads, some of the things that seem really fit for us and what we've seen in terms of our work with other fathers and families. But before we jump into that, I just want to briefly about why waste the time? Why bother intervening with dads? What do the statistics say and the current research about the value for, number one, for kids, like we talked about, one of our pillars. Number two, the value for relationships when dads get involved with their kids. And number three, one that sometimes gets forgotten, what is the value for dads when dads get involved with their kids? So the one stat that stuck out with for me in terms of children is this. If a child is a healthy, involved father, that is 80% less likely to spend time in jail. Repeat that. If a child is a healthy, involved father, that's 80% likely to spend time in jail. Two that stuck out with me in my work with fathers. If a child has a healthy, involved father, that child is 75% less likely to become a young parent before their time. If a child father, that child is 75% less likely to become a young teen parent. And just to clarify, when we were dad, a lot of us have that traditional dad vision in our mind about, mom and dad married, dad's, this regular view. We have a much broader view of what and who dad can be. It's not always just biological dad. A lot of biological dads have flown the coop or passed away, or lots of those. There's lots of different ways that dad can look. A lot of times mom and dad aren't necessarily romantically together, but are choosing to co-parent. And so when we say that word dad or father, we have quite a broad context of what that can look like. I've screened a couple of the values for children in terms of positive values, and on the next screen you'll see some of the decrease in negative outcomes. And I'm not going to go over those in detail, but I will tell you there is a couple of real current reports that have come out. For those of you either dads that are listening that want to look at some of the hard stats of why bother taking the time and energy to engage my kids, or for practitioners that are maybe writing grant proposals and want some current Canadian research to include there. That's one of the most powerful things when you're writing grants, if you can include current local research. Couple here for you. You may want to get your pen ready. In Alberta, they just released a report just last month called How and Why to Include Fathers in Government-Funded Parenting Strategies. And was put together by a team in Alberta, and it is probably as current as we have in Canada right now in terms of all the stats around father investing time, dollars, and energy in dad programming. If you want to download that report, it can be found on preventdomesticviolence.ca, or either Brian or myself at the end of the session, and we'll make sure to email that document to you. Another one that's not necessarily local to Canada, but are in the South, in the U.S., an organization called MenCare just released State of America's Fathers, and another great bundle of research information can be found at men-care.org. Download it there, or please do email us again, and we'll get that to you. Some may be wondering, whereabouts do you get fathering funding from? And a couple of the places that have been, I think, favorable to us in the past, in B, at least, Success by Six, the Law Foundation, your local community, whether it's a Toronto Foundation, for us it's the Vancouver Foundation, Crime Prevention, our local Children's Services, MCFD here, Public Health Agency of Canada have all been places where we've been successful in the past in grant applications. Okay, so we've read a little bit of that value for children in terms of some of the negatives and positives. In terms of relationships, it's just a simple fact that there's a team approach. There's two people to bounce back and forth. If one person's at the end of their rope, which I've been at many times with my child in the middle of the night when he's been hollering, my wife's been able to step in and say, hey, you know what, I've got this. You go take a break or go blow off some steam or whatnot. But it also has connections in terms of when dads are involved with their kids, they're more connected to family. I get out and do more family trips across the country to go visit my in-laws or to go visit cousins because I love my kids engage in those relationships. That's some of the value for relationships. Last but not least, there's value for dads. And this hit home for me. I grew up in North Vancouver, right next to Lynn Canyon, which is a dangerous cliff jumping place, and I would go and risk life and limb leaping off these cliffs. I went back after I had kids, visited some buddies, stood at the top of one of these cliffs, and they jumped off, and I was just about to go, and my heart just sunk, and it felt like I had my son Braden's hand in one hand and my daughter Claire's hand in the other hand. Suddenly I wasn't risking my own life anymore. If something happened to me, it had impact on my kids, and I made a different decision that day. I didn't jump, and I got mocked, and I got called all sorts of names, but when fathers choose to get involved in our kids, we make better choices. And so, and we get involved in community, and we go to the parades, and we go, become coaches of basketball teams and that sort of stuff. So dads are healthier. They're more involved in community when they choose to be involved with their kids. It's like the shotgun blast from the water hose, about some research that's out there. If you've got questions about that, certainly be in touch, and we'd be happy to get more information to you. So here's our 10 tips. How is it going to work? First of all, we're going to speak to the father himself. So you dads that are on the call from across the country, I think there's close to 200 people on this call. We will speak first of all to you directly in terms of this tip, and then second, we will talk to the practitioners about ways to kind of see this move into action in your programming. So tip number one, here we go. Tip number one is get your hands dirty ASAP. Get dirty as soon as possible. And so you dads out there, research says that when you get involved in the prenatal period before your child's even born, the exponential growth of dads that stick around for the duration, it just goes through the roof. So the quicker you can get involved in your child's life, before ever in that hospital room, before they even see the day, that can increase your chances of sticking around and being there for the duration. I saw this picture across my Facebook feed. It said there are 140 Saturdays between your child's birth and when they're in college. 900 and is done. And it feels like yesterday that my son Braden, who's 6'2" and 15 years old now, it feels like it should be years ago that he was a swaddled baby in my arms. And it flies. The quicker you can get involved, the longer the staying power is going to be for you. So practitioners, make opportunities for dads to connect prenatally. Make space and welcome dads into your prenatal programming and your early years programming. And sometimes our job as practitioners, and we've certainly had to do this work here in Abbotsford, is doing the pre-work, having mom expect dad to actually participate. A lot of the women that we've worked with in the past, haven't necessarily had good father examples, or they've simply just had nothing at all, and so they don't really know what to expect of others. And so our job is creating some of that expectation. Hey, you can expect your guy to come to your prenatal class or bring your child to a drop-in. All the while, and I will couch this with all the while making sure that those who are attending that don't have a partner, that are moms doing the job all on their own, feel safe, valued, feel like they've got what it takes. And so that's a bit of a balancing act. Brian, behind door number 2.
Door number 2 is, dads, we got to look after our relationships. So the relationship that our kids are watching as we get along with our partner, with whoever we're raising the child with, and really when we look at that, there's really a teamwork in terms of what it means to raise kids these days. We've got grandparents, we've got uncles, we've got a big family. All that can be part of raising a child. But also, what we have to be looking after are those relationships that we have as parents. And whether or not we're in a romantic relationship, if we're still living with mom, that doesn't matter. We still have to co-parent, even if we're not together as partner. We still have to parent our kids together. So it's really important that as dads we speak well of mom, that we encourage respect for mom. We talk about how what she brings to the child, and because our kids need to hear that kind of thing and learn a lot from that. They learn a lot from what they hear and what they're seeing from us as we're interacting with their mom in particular. It's interesting. Just came across a report recently that's talking about what's happening in countries like India. So where dads are refusing to give into the pressures of child marriages for their daughters now. The men are starting to look at that structure, what the dowry system means, and all that's happening in kind of traditionally in countries like that. And there are fathers that are starting to resist those, and they're making different choices. And so I really see that that's a different experience for those that are growing up. Those boys are going to be learning different things because of what they're seeing their dads do, and bring about some significant changes. So dads, we're a very strong and clear example of what it means to be in a relationship, and are watching that regularly. So we need to look after that, and to be respectful of mom and the other parents that might be part of raising the kids. For those that work with dads, partners, I think we got to be very open about talking about relationship issues, not to be afraid to kind of walk into those areas and ask some questions about just how they're going. And sometimes it's just having a listening ear. And there's resources that you can access for dads as well that are focused specifically on the relationship. We have a booklet called Dads Renovate Your Relationship, and that's a booklet that's it's got 14 tools for dads to support the relationship they have with their partner. Really focused around the birth of the baby and just kind of all the changes that happen there, because we know that at the birth of a child, that's where there's all kinds of changes that are happening. And one of the things is just how dads change in their relationships. Very same thing. Another thing we can do when we're trying to engage and provide services for dads is to have activities and events that are for families together. I don't know about you, Jeff, but I'm hearing a lot of dads ask for things to do with their families. It's not just about the dads-only programs these days. They want time with their families, so whether that's a drop-in program or some kind of parent support or something, some activity, some event, dads know they can bring their whole families. So it's not just on their own. And I think just a word of caution too, especially when we're thinking about relationships, is to watch out for some of the dad bashing that can go on. I think there's sort of a place for venting and for saying, for either whether it's women or men to talk about happening at home and some of the relationship struggles that might be happening there. But I think it's really important to kind of keep that in check and to be careful about the fine line between just venting and suddenly something becoming disrespectful. I learned that pretty early on in my work with dads, that a lot of times dads, they have problems with the mother child. They wanted to talk about things, and it would start to get a little emotional, a little heated. And so we had to take kind of hard to bring those guys back to focusing on the kids and their parenting skills, and that they support for the relationships. And we need to find ways to do that in a respectful way. So it's important, and we can be supporting that as we're working with dads too.
Great words, Brian. Thanks. Tip number 3 is this: link up, connect with other dads. And you dads that are on the line, I don't know if you're like me or not, but I don't necessarily learn by being told what to do. I know when my wife tells me to do something that wells up inside of me that just wants to go like, "Rah! I'm going to do the opposite just to get under your skin." And I don't know why it's there, but I've talked with other dads and they seem to have some of that same thing going on. It's silly, but it seems to be something that a reaction that dads have, and maybe some women as well too. I know myself and other dads I've talked to learn by really watching and observing and seeing other dads in action, and I really call it osmosis. And so dads, if you want to build your dad skills, figure your kind of dad toolbox, get yourself in the space with other dads. Rub shoulders with other guys that are doing the parenting thing. And that can be either just you connecting with other dads without your kids, but there's really real value in getting out there with your kids and kind of doing life together. When I was running a dad drop-in, I was the cook, I was the host, I was kind of the whole kit and caboodle, and I brought my daughter Claire along to the drop-in, and we were, I was trying to flip bacon and cook pancakes, and she was playing in the room. I could kind of see her through the glass, and one guy poked his head around the door and said, "Jeff, your daughter just wiped on the wall." And I went, "Are you kidding me? I'm trying to flip bacon and pancakes." And so I went in there a little bit flustered, and suddenly I realized every eye is on me, and here I am, the father support worker. Man, I really need to think about how I'm going to react to this. So I used whatever best skill I had, and I kind of got down on one knee, and I made eye contact, and I said, "Hey, sweetheart, it's okay. Let's go get you cleaned up." And I didn't worry about the poop on the wall first. I got her taken care of and made sure, she was, not hard in the process. And then I went back, cleaned it up, and away I went. Didn't think much of it. Well, the next week, this fellow that came that was a real yeller, and he just would frustrate and blow off the handle, and his kid did something the next week, and I was like, "Oh, here we go." And I watched him get down on one knee, look at his kid's eyes, and say, "Hey, son, it's all right. Don't worry about it. We'll get figured out." And learned that from me. He got skill from me. I did that last week, and so alarming to me to think that's how guys learn. They learn by being in the presence of other dads, and learn by saying, "Hey, you know what? I'm watching that guy discipline his kid over there, and that just doesn't feel right. I'm not disciplining my kid that way." So the more you can get in the space of other dads, that's where learning happens. That's where mentorship happens. And the stats say if we do nothing to change, about our parenting strategies or whatnot, there's a 99% chance you're going to parent the exact same way that you parented. And some of us, that's great. For some of us, that's really scary. And so it's important to get rubbing shoulders with other dads, learn some other techniques, take what you want, toss away what doesn't work for you. And I was on a phone call with my father this morning talking about he and I do a Father's Day thing together here in Abbotsford. We volunteer together. And I was telling him about this webinar today, and he said, "Hey, send the sign-up details." And so it's kind of fun for me to think that my dad is on this call too. And hey, Dad, love you. That to me has been a great learning tool to get rubbing shoulders with other dads and kind of take what works for you to away what doesn't work. Practitioners, this applies to you in a few different ways. In these opportunities, how can you get 2, 3, 4, 10 dads in the same building together, in the same space, have similar experiences in life, and get them rubbing shoulders? And I would encourage you not just to have those dads that are struggling, those vulnerable dads, just a pack of those. We started with that and found that we had to be kind of the the be-all, end-all, trying to serve these dads and meet their needs and stuff. And what has worked very well for us is to have some of those dads that are really struggling and mix in that some dads that come intentionally. And there are the dads in your community that are actually healthy guys that have got some of it out and are kind of, well along the road that want to give back, but they just don't have a freaking clue how to do it. Invite those guys out to be a part of that. Actions that happen there between the guys that are struggling and the guys that are, strong, beautiful stuff happens. And it's taken the weight off us as practitioners, too. We don't have to be everything to these guys anymore. We just have to create a culture, an environment where there's space for mentorship to happen. I remember once this one was actually a buddy of mine that came out to the breakfast with his little kids, a solid dad, a guy that was really struggling. They got chatting over breakfast, and the guy was, I had to walk today because my back brakes are shot. And my buddy says to him, "Hey, you know what? I ought to change those. You know what? What are you doing after this?" "Oh, I've got no plans." "Grab and come on over to my house. Bring your car over to my house. I fix those things. Let's do it together." And so they spent the afternoon together. The kids played on the lawn. while two dads, learned how to fix brakes. That is mentorship. That's the beauty that happens when guys get together and start rubbing shoulders. Very critical mass. One dad, two dads in a group is awkward. So work at getting kind of 3, 4, so the guys feel that kind of comfort level when they come. And you will be surprised how chatty dads get when they're in a group. It surprises me. Sometimes it's tougher to shut the dad up than it is some of the mums in some of those groups. Another way to get dads together, dads love to be needed. I need this hinge fixed. My chair needs to be assembled at work. This technology is just not working for us. Invite dads in. That's a great way to get them through the door and connecting together. Link up, connect with other dads.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I think it's a great opportunity to have dads together, because we don't, as a guy, I don't often have those kind of conversations at the lunchtime table or at other places that I might not be, might be. So to be able to have a place to come to like that, where it's a group of other dads, other men that I'm with that are raising their kids, and that connection, no matter what part of life we might be coming from.
Absolutely. Number 4, quality trumps quantity. Make time great again.
You had to put that picture in there. You had to do that picture, didn't you?
I got in trouble from Brian when he was looking through the PowerPoint and saw that I dropped Mr. Trump in here, but I thought it just kind of fit for no other reason. This is not any kind of a endorsement of Mr. Trump's presidential run. I just love his hair so much. It's fun to see on the PowerPoint. But there is there's this mentality that you need to spend as much time with your child as possible. Absolutely. Every opportunity you have to spend with your kid is great, but just coexisting together doesn't cut it. Just in the same room together, has value, but there's a real value to real quality time. I'd say, sitting in a room together, not really interacting for 3 hours, versus your child having 60 seconds of your dedicated, undivided attention. 60 seconds the time together. And I'll tell you a story about my father, and I know he's actually here listening and probably will remember this well when this kind of hit home for me. 15, 16 years old, I loved Volkswagen Bugs. And my dad, bless it, is not a car guy. He doesn't change his own oil. He doesn't work on his car. It's just not something that he's that's hardwired into him. He'd rather, be out in nature or doing a hike or something. And I remember the day that he came to me and said, "Hey, Jeff, I hear having this Volkswagen show down at Seattle International Raceway. What do you think about you and I taking off for the weekend and spend the weekend down there looking at this Volkswagen show?" What? Like, you want to go to a Volkswagen show? He said, "Yeah, I'd love to go. I'd love to go along with you." And we went the weekend. For the first time in my life, I ate steak and eggs, and I loved it. And we spent the weekend, the hot weekend, walking the asphalt, looking at these cars, looking at parts. And I think my dad bought me a set of new tires for the front for my Volkswagen Bug. And man, I tell you, that's the most solid instances of when I felt loved by my dad, because I know he was out there doing it not because he loved cars, not because he had any appreciation for anything going on there, other than he knew it was important to me. And the way that impacted my life, Whitaker came walking the hallway, 7 or 8 years ago, with that box of Polly Pockets. The worst invention of all time. These tiny little dolls with tiny clothes my fat fingers cannot put on. I remembered how important I felt when my dad took an interest in something that was important to me. And every effort to lay down on the floor for a little bit and put on that tiny little dress and pull on those tiny little pants and the boots and play that with my daughter, because to me that was quality divided attention time. And this can work, dads, in your situations. You feel this pressure to be, spend a whole afternoon together, and yes, there's some value in that, but instead try this. this is, no more than 30 seconds, 1 minute of your time, and it's covered in, if you've been to a triple P parenting class, this is a big piece of what they talk about. But they say when your child comes to you, say I'm in my office working on my computer, sending emails or answering emails or looking up something on the internet, and my son comes to me and says, "Hey, Dad, I want to show you something that I did at school today." Well, my gut tells me, I got to get this done. Son, just give me a break. Come on, I'm trying to get this email sent here. I'll look at it after. If we want, that quality time with kids, turn away from my laptop. I come close. I make eye contact with my son. Maybe I put my hand on his shoulder. I say, "Hey, Jackson, what do you got to show me?" And he'll tell me about, this rock that he painted at school, or this picture that he painted, or this new, experience he had at school. Sometimes it's no more than 30 seconds, maybe 5 seconds max. The power that comes out of that experience is astronomical. Mike has felt, and he's got the message, that he is more important than whatever it is I'm doing on here. And I'm surprised how little time it takes, and yet the rewards out of that. So that's a little trick for you to try, next, as you go from here and your kids are playing outside, or you go to school to pick them up and you're bringing them home, give it a try. In terms of how this kind of makes, outworks itself with you, make for dads of those parenting programs, encourage dads to explore what makes their kids come alive. And it's the natural way for us as dads to say, I want them to love what I love. And some dads it's fishing. It's certainly not that for me. I'm not a fisherman at all. But for some dads it's fishing. For some dads it's watching sports. But it's that much harder and yet that much more powerful when they explore what makes their kids come alive. I found out my son Jackson liked bird watching. Where the heck did you get bird watching from? It's certainly not something that came from me or from where else. My older son is a hockey fanatic, and I'm not a sports guy at all. I'm so far from an athlete that it's embarrassing. But for me to cuddle up on the couch beside him and watch a hockey game, is me for him, because he knows it's not something that is necessarily I'm doing my own, but I'm doing it because I enjoy and value time with him. The thing is, I remember my son Braden, I went out and bought him a dirt bike because I wanted a dirt bike when I was a kid and I never had one. We went to the hill. I was about to unload the dirt bikes out, and he walks out and he goes, "Dad, can we just go in there and go for a nature hike?" And I said, do you know how much money I've spent on this freaking dirt bike? And he just wanted to go walk through nature. And so that's what we did. It just about tore my heart out, knowing that I had dirt bikes sitting in the back of the truck, and here we are hiking. But that was what was meaningful to him. All being said, matters too.
Yeah, it's to always encourage dads and try to keep this in for myself too. It's make whatever quality we have the highest quality we can. Because a lot of guys that might get an hour or two of visitation with their kids through the week. So they're going to be spending 4 or 5 hours a day with their kids. Like it really it will vary. But there's such a significant thing when our kids from us as dads that we're intentionally making the choice to be in their presence and to be with them. That's what matters. No matter how much time we've got, what kind of quality are we making it? So,
good point.
Yeah, those are good thoughts there, Jeff. Thanks. Tip number 5 says, "Do what I say, not what I do." Well, this really kind of hits home. Realizing that, what the kids are going to follow our examples, no matter what. They're going to end up talking like us. They're going to end up saying things like us. I mean, kind of a funny little thing, but I remember a few years ago I sneezed, and I sounded just like Dad when I sneezed. Wow, it doesn't fall that far from the tree. So kids do follow our example, and I think for guys, for dads, we need to be aware of that. Thinking about a program that we did here in a family center that I'm a part of, we called it Cool Karate for Dads and Kids. Brought in a sensei, a karate instructor, and what we did was have a of the karate skills with some discussion and activities around healthy lifestyle. And we would have the dads and the kids. The kids were about age 6 to 12, somewhere in there. There must have been probably about 10 families, so we're looking 20 to 25 people. The kids were there. The sensei's up there directing everybody through the karate moves, and a lot of work going on there. And it was very basic stuff. We weren't doing anything too much, but it was punching those bags and learning the kicks and things. It was a great time. But what was really interesting was watching the kids react when they saw their dads trying these things. So once they would get us doing this really odd stretch, and we're all sort of in our 30s and 40s, and some of them move for a long time like this. So we're stretching ourselves out, and so you would just see one of the kids, as they're in this position, some karate position, and they would look over their shoulder back at their dad, and start struggling to get into that position too, and kind of maybe falling over or something. The look on his face of pain, and I don't know, all that's going on, and to see the look of joy on their kid's face, pride that wow, my dad's trying something new. And I think our kids, it's just a good example that our kids are watching everything, and they're taking a message from everything that we do. And I guess I'm constantly having to remind myself of what's the message. When I say something or do something, I act in a certain way. I spend my free time. Earlier, how do I treat their mom? All that stuff. Kids learning from what they see. And during that karate time, it was just priceless for me watching kids see their dads do things. And I would wonder what's going on inside the child's mind. That wow, dad can do this. I think I can do it too. Or my dad's pretty cool. Look what he's trying out. Like those are just great opportunities for bonding, and I think one of those times that happens so much is when we do try new stuff, and as dads and how we react to things. So there's a lot of bonding that comes in shared activities too. So when dads and kids are doing things together, that's a great model to follow. They're seeing their dads try new things, even though it's tough and sometimes might hurt. So all those things. So we have to be, I guess as a dad, it just means I've got to be kind of constantly thinking about what I'm seeing, what I'm doing, and realizing that as a role model, I'm an example for my kids to follow. It really kind of hit home for me. This is probably about 10 years ago. 3 daughters, and they're all upper teens now. But back when I think they must be about 4, 6, and 8 years old, and we walked the field. It had snowed the night before. We were through this field. It was a beautiful sunny day. The snow hadn't been touched by anybody. We were the first people to walk through this snow-covered field. And I remember looking out at some point. We've been walking for a while, and I couldn't see my kids. We were a great big field, and my kids aren't anywhere. And they're actually all lined up behind me, walking in my footprints. The snow was about 6 or 8 inches deep, and the kids were just stepping in my footprints. And they had this kind of fun with it, and started walking really big steps. And Dad, you're walking too big. And just turning circles, doing some good stuff with that. We had a lot of fun. But thinking about it later, I realized, that's kind of what our life is like as a dad. We are in these footprints. We're leaving these footprints by how we act, what we say, how we treat people, the decisions we make, patience, compassion, anger, all that. That's all about footprints that our kids are watching. And so what are they following? And that's, again, been one of those moments, I think, for me that's stuck my whole parent life here of reminding myself, well, what are my kids taking from what they're seeing in me right now? A lot of times it's those little things too. It's not big decisions always. It's usually the little we react to things, and the little times maybe I'm impatient when I shouldn't have been, and think that.
Hey, Brian, I'm reminded of a story again with my dad. I think how young I was. I was probably close to 10 or something, and I think we were driving in Saskatoon, and we were waiting to turn left at an intersection, and I went to turn left, and this kid on a skateboard or something came flying to the intersection, and my dad had to kind of lurch to a stop as this kid went through the crosswalk. And yeah, my dad was, maybe in the wrong some. This kid was in the wrong some, but this kid came up to my dad's window and started, throwing F-bombs and screaming at my dad. And I remember bracing myself. My dad was, used to be a SWAT guy on the Calgary Police, and I was waiting for him to kind of grab this kid and smash him into the ground or shout at him or something. And I remember my dad's reaction. He said, "I'm so sorry. It's totally my fault. I apologize for that." And he was so soft and gentle with this kid who was just letting him have it. That has stuck with me for the last, 35 years. That kind of action. And every time someone comes to me and screams and yells at me, I remember that. And I watched that and I thought, man, that felt really good when my dad did that.
Yeah, and I think your dad he could telling you all the time, be kind to people, react a certain way.
Yeah.
But when we see dad go through on those words, that's where the real happens for us, I think.
Agreed.
So we can do what he does, and not just what he says. That story. Just for practice, I just had one little example that I think often gets dads thinking in a good way around these things. And so dad's group, I'll ask the question, what's one word you want your child to use to describe you when they're 35 years old? And so we want, it's just, I think, helpful for dads to be thinking about that long-term kind of thing. Like when my child is 35, maybe they have kids of their own, they're reflecting back on me as a dad, what comes to mind? And out of that, it's being able to think through, okay, so what am I doing now that's helping that to happen? If I want my child to be describing me as a man with integrity, for example, when they're 35, well, what am I doing now when they are 2 and 4 and 10, 16 years old, really reinforcing that for them?
That's a great question.
Just kind of getting that long-term perspective on things is a helpful thing. Yeah. That was number 5. Moving on, tip number 6 here is overrated. Are we a round of applause with that one? Reality says whether you make $30,000 a year or $100,000 a year, you probably spend all the money you got for the most part to spend up to what we got, and it's. So I think it's really significant and important for us to find that balance when we're thinking about work and family, and to realize that work does have a really important place. I mean, I think if we talk to a bunch of dads, the majority of men still feel that providing is, if not the most important role they play with their kids. And maybe it's not that we're trying to avoid and take dads away from that role of providing. I think what we're trying to do in these days and how we talk about fatherhood and encourage fatherhood is to add more to that role of provider. Where maybe 40 or 50 years ago, dad did see themselves as provider. That's what I did. That was my goal. And was kind of how nurturing was defined for dads. Now I think nurturing is defined in a much broader sense, and providing still is a significant part of that. And many of us as men still get our sense of almost our identity in being able to provide for our kids and provide for our family. So work is necessary. Work is important, but it's the kind of thing we really need to find balance in. So like what happens when we feel a little bit of stress? Sometimes actually we avoid the family and go back to work if things aren't great at home. Sometimes it's easier at work. Work is predictable. Workplace that I know what's going to happen. People meet me with respect at work. When I say something, people respond. I go home, I might not feel like I'm getting that. My kids might be having a bad day. Maybe my partner's all upset about something. Like it gets unpredictable. So we have to, as dads, I think, be aware of some of the dynamics of work and family and how to find balance in that thing. I don't think any will come to the end of their life wishing they had worked more. I think most of us be saying or be thinking about things like, how did I spend my time? What do my kids think about me? What did I give back to the community? And the more as a dad we can find that kind of balance, I think that the better off we're when we're balance helps us in terms of connecting with community, connect with our kids, and being a dad that, like Jeff had mentioned earlier, just how fatherhood helps us. So practitioners, I think part of recognizing the impact of work on dads is to schedule events or programs or things that are out there that you're trying to offer at times that are around work, and understand that work does play a key role there. So we scheduling things. We make things available when dads are around. So some thoughts on work. The tip number 7 talks about don't believe the hype. You can get support for being a dad, or you can get ideas about being a dad from all kinds of places. You just go on Google, you can do any kind of search on the internet, and all kinds of answers to any kind of problem that we're running into, any issue that's out there. But I guess what we really think is important is that we follow our gut. Yes, we might not know the answer specifically. We might not. There are times we need to be asking questions, looking for ideas. But I think sometimes too that sort of takes away the value that, and some might intrinsically know a little bit about this anyway. So really trust myself to actually get there and spin there and make a decision about something. So this tip has a lot to do for dads around what it means to be confident, to have confidence as a dad. I think in a lot of ways as men we're trying to figure out if I've got what it takes to be the man my child needs. And we go in all kinds of places for that question, for the answer to that question. We might go to mom with that. We might kind of bring it to the kids. Like we're trying to get that answered. And really, in some ways, I think the best way to get it answered is to kind of have the faith that we can do this. To trust ourselves, to try stuff out, to be courageous in our parenting, and to realize that maybe I'm not likely to do something that's going to intentionally hurt my child, but we can sometimes be afraid of that. And it always surprised me how when I have taken a step of courage into my daughter's lives, that they've always responded very positively. I remember when Jenna was about 12 years old, she had to go through a lot of the puberty things, and her body questions were starting to kick in. She wasn't eating much. She was getting fairly thin, and I'm getting worried for a while about this, and then I just realized, well, I'm thinking about it, but what am I doing about it? And a lot of issues in this and those kind of things, those issues with girls, but it was interesting how after I made an intentional choice to start talking with her about it and to identify some of those things and to mention just what I see is happening, that's where she started to respond with some really clear change in terms of positive impact on her self-esteem and her self-image, and a lot of health for herself and a lot of balance for herself. And so that's a moment to look back and think, wow, I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I was able to talk with her about that. It taught me a lot too, that about how kids respond when we do things. So dads, there is information out there. There's conversations that can happen, but sometimes that wisdom that we look for out there ends up contradicting itself, and so we do need to just follow our gut and kind of take some of those steps. And so, as practitioners, a couple things to think about is just be aware that we don't make decisions for dads. We don't need to appear as the expert. We want to ask questions. We want to encourage dads to be coming up with their own answers and to be asking their questions, and to pointing dads to resources and making suggestions, absolutely, because as an expert, quote unquote, we do have experience and we have knowledge that dads are looking for. At the same time, we want to be, if we're thinking about this from a strength-based perspective, we're looking at that dads have something to give and just have things that they're able to do, and that they have knowledge, they have ideas, they have experience, and to be able to. I think a lot of the times too for us guys, this little tip or the ideas that we're talking about here under not believe hype are within ourselves because we're not really sure, or we have a good model of a dad. Maybe growing up with a dad who's been really engaged, and so we're not really aware of what to say, what to do, and how to respond. Our having the purposeful intention of just for my child, we're likely going to do the right thing, or at least a good thing. Nothing's ever perfect, but at least we know we're going to do a good thing. So we need to troubles, I guess, in those moments.
Yeah.
Could you talk about nobody being perfect?
Well, I want to say this number 8 is brought to you by Hannah Montana, which gives away my daughter's age. Watched many Hannah Montana movies, and her theme song "Nobody's Perfect," which is also the Public Health Agency of Canada's parenting program, top notch. Nobody's perfect, and you do not need to master it all. Tip number 8. Dad, I want to encourage you to let go of trying to get everything right. Get all your ducks in a row, because it ain't going to happen. And I find myself getting jealous sometimes when I see those other dads out there that are maybe friends of mine or somebody I see on Facebook that just does a phenomenal job of being the jock dad. And they're out there with their kids, playing sports all the time, coaching their kids, and it's just, that is not a skill of mine. I'm not athletic. It's not something that I do well. It doesn't mean I don't get at it, but you don't need to be perfect in every single area of fatherhood. Instead, I encourage you, dads, work within your natural skills and excel. Lots of different areas of fatherhood. There's providing, there's nurturing, like Brian talked about. There's those guys, the outdoors activists, administrator, the teacher of skills. You'll see up on here, cards that Dad Central Alberta made that talk about some of those different dads, the jock dad, the half dad, the dad, the digital dad, the octane dad. There's areas that you're going to excel and there's areas that you're going to suck. It's the way it is. Find those areas where you excel and work on those. And those areas where you're weak, to the side. Practice the way this applies to you. Focus on, don't expect dads to be all things in all areas. It's not going to happen. It's the same way for moms. Some moms are great at some areas and are weak in other areas. That's just part of life. I remember this fellow that I worked with, his name was, I always try to make fake names for the people for confidentiality, but I ended up spilling their name anyway. So his name was James. And he was a dad. His kid had been apprehended by the ministry at a young age. He was not doing a lot of things right in terms of fathering. And yet, James, whenever I saw him, was doing one thing right. And it was, his kid was always on his mind. He was always praying for his kid. He was always wishing, dreaming for his kid. Whenever I saw him, he'd pull out his wallet and he would open it up and then go, and 30 pictures would fall out, and he'd tell all about the latest tooth lost or the hair growing or the this and that he saw in his visits. And that's where I started with James. I said, hey, I really like the way that you are constantly thinking and dreaming and praying and wishing for your child. That's a great trait to have. And that's where we started with James. Another fellow that I knew, he and girlfriend had split up, and the girlfriend moved to a different city. In Abbotsford, there's the Fraser River divides here in Mission. Mom's in Mission, he lived here in Abbotsford. The relationship, but she called him one night in tears and said, I don't know what to do. Our son has no diapers. And I'm at the end of my rope. I have no money. And this dad, who did his driver's license, walked from his house down to a local Walmart and picked up a big box of diapers. And the dad commenced walking the 7 kilometers along the way to this next city and walked those diapers up the hill to the house, dropped them off and said, hey, didn't want my kid going out, here you go. And then he walked home. And story after, and again, this was dad that had, some real shortcomings in terms of fathering. And I said, man, I got to tell you, you knocked that one out of the park. In terms of providing, it's top notch. Man, that cost you a lot, not just financially for the diapers, but all the other, walking there and all the the logistics that get that. Really proud of you. Find a place to start where guys have some skills. Start at that place and then work from there, building their skills. 9. Say sorry, and you'll see up here our local wonder child Justin Bieber, who has sorry many times. Oh boy, for turn my phone down. My apologies. This one really is about it's not so important to get it right the first time. It's just not it's not realistic in life. Whether it's talking about relationships, whether we're talking about parenting, we're talking about being an employee. You're going to make mistakes. What's more important is how you respond to those mistakes. Again, we're going to go back to our tip number 5, do what I say, not what I do. Realizing that our kids are watching us as we make mistakes and how we respond to them. And they're going to learn how to, engage, fair and defeat and, conflict in life from that. And I think back to, I grew up in a small town when I was younger called Eston, Saskatchewan. I was lucky to have both grandparents living a few blocks away from my house. And my grandpa, my father's dad, asked me to come over and paint his fence. So I grabbed Chad and we went to paint his fence, and we did a terrible job. We got paint all over the place, on the garage, on each other. My grandpa was a very kind man. I hardly ever remember him raising his voice or anything, but he came out, he got angry with me, and he sent me home. He said, "You're out of here. You're not finished. I'll finish the fence. Go home." And I remember getting home and being just broken. I've let Grandpa down. I'm an idiot. I'm a loser. And it affected the rest of my day. I remember being in bed that night and just being broken that I disappointed my grandpa. And then the show coming down the hallway. My grandpa was a small man. He had a huge hunchback, and I saw this hunchback coming down the hallway. And he came, sat on my bed, and I looked at him, and I could see he had been crying. And he said to me, "Jeff, ever find it in your heart to forgive this old man for the way he talked to you today?" And that has impacted me to this day. The value of saying we're sorry to our kids and making things right. It's not so much how we react the first time, although we do our best to react, appropriately to situations. What's more important is how we respond to those mistakes we made. Dads, take the opportunity to say you're sorry to your kids, to make it right with them. There is immense amount of power in that. Those teach moments will be milestones for your kids. Practitioners, again, similar to our last tip, you don't need to be the experts. Just find a whole lot of solace in knowing that you don't know it all. That here we are, two travelers walking the same road. I'm over here, you're over here, but we're still figuring this out as we go. But then, when find out you don't know it all, go find answers for them and follow through on those things, and that goes miles to building relationship, modeling trust, modeling our willingness to not have all the answers.
Next, tip number 10. Tip is enjoy your child. And I guess in some ways you think, well, that's a brainer, right? Like, of course we should enjoy our kids. And that's true. And time to fly. Like John mentioned earlier, he's sort of like his old son 3 years ago. He's in diapers, but he's actually driving a car, right, Jeff? Like, it's just amazing how time does fly. So we just encourage dads to enjoy the ride, to realize that, our life is now different. Having a child will change us, but it makes life deeper and richer. And there's such a significant thing that when our child feels and knows that we enjoy them, that means so much to our kids. And I think maybe the biggest point for me in this thought is that remember what their dads feel about them. So did dad being around me? Did dad get afraid all the time? Like, those are the kind of things that we remember as adults when you think back to what your dad was like. They're memories, but all the time those memories will also have a feeling. And we think about that idea of, okay, when our kids are 35, what are they going to be saying? Well, what are our kids going to feel? What are they going to be saying about what dad thought about them. And if my kids can get to that place where they're able to, you know what, I liked having me around. I think that's maybe kind of summing up a lot of the tips we talked about here. That kids who can feel their dad likes them there, that kids are not in the way, but dad go out of his way to spend time with them, to meet their needs, who laughs with the kids, who jokes around, who plays with them, who's serious when he needs to. But ultimately, it's that feeling of, does my dad enjoy me? Do you like being? Because that just says so much to a child who feels like is then enjoyable. I mean, that's so much about what self-esteem is. Am I somebody who's worth being around? And when we enjoy our child, part of the message is, you are worth my time. You are worth being with, and I enjoy being with you. So we enjoy our kids. Tell them that we do. Tell them we enjoy them. Sometimes we'll use the word love. We'll say, I love you. But what are some other words, like, I enjoy you. I love being around you. This is so much fun when we do this kind of thing together. And I guess it's also important to look like we're enjoying them. It's not just saying a word, but do we look like we're enjoying being there? And those are really significant things. We always want our kids to feel welcome in our presence, even if we've had a bad day, or we're feeling stressed, or somebody's yelled at us at work, or whatever's been going on. We need to find ways to look after ourselves so that we can be present for our kids. We want that because it's easy maybe when the kids are 2 and 4, but there come a time where our kids are adolescents, or they're getting into that age where maybe they don't want to hang on every word we say. Maybe they don't always want to be around us. Maybe they're not always going to be asking us to be there. I think the more we enjoy our children when they're young, and to do that, the more we're going to appreciate our presence as they grow up too. So practitioners too, it's about giving dads time with their kids. It's a few good things that you hear that does. Like Jeff, you've had a number of stories here today where you've noticed that dad has done something, and you've just affirmed them and what their role is. That's significant stuff. Sometimes we need to have it point out what we're doing and how our kids are responding to us. And so I think for those of us that work with dads, we can be watching for ways to affirm what we're seeing is happening between dads and their kids.
Yeah, those are powerful words that practitioners can speak in terms of word of affirmation for dads. We're so good at picking out that they're doing well, but a lot of times dads struggle in seeing and acknowledging and affirming those things where they actually are shining. Yeah. Just as we move towards some of our few last thoughts here, I want to invite you, if you have any questions or comments, please take to write down in that box in the bottom right corner of your screen, and we'll look at addressing a few of those in the last few minutes here. So those are our 10 tips for today. Number 1, get your hands dirty ASAP. Number 2, dads, look after your relationships. Number 3, link up, connect with other dads. Number 4, quality trumps quantity. 5, do what I say, not what I do. Number 6, work overrated. Number 7, don't believe the hype. Number 8, nobody's perfect. Number 9, say you're sorry. And number 10, enjoy your child. Briefly, as we move towards our end, we wanted to discuss, or at least share with you, a resource that's out there that we would certainly be happy to send your way for those of you that are women and working with men. There's actually a lot of women out there that, for many years have been working and engaging with men as practitioners, and have put together a fair bit of material on some of their learnings. And so we don't have time to discuss that all today. Hopefully, maybe in a future webinar, we will engage that topic. But for now, I want you to know there is a document by Julie Campbell, a well-written document that talks about 15 or so tips that she's learned over the years. There's also a video on mydad.ca, Women Working with Men. I invite you to visit that website and take a look at the video to get some ideas of tips and tricks around ways that you best can draw their shells, make them jump on the bandwagon and participate as a healthy, involved father. a few words about Dad Central and where it's headed.
Yeah, so kind of mentioned some things at the start too. Said we have representation in some of the areas in Canada, but we really want to be a national presence. And so we're looking for representation from Newfoundland, Labrador, from Nova Scotia, PEI, Yukon, West Territories, and Nunavut. And we want to have some representation in our little network. The way that works is we meet bi-monthly through teleconference, and we have a bit of a work plan that we're going through. That's been, I guess, some working on for a couple of years now. Different things have come up, and we've been a different focus. And actually, this social media open house and the webinar that we're doing now, this was part of the work plan that we had of just how to launch Central Canada and to start spreading the word. So if anybody's interested in joining up onto our network, just let myself or Jeff know, and we would have a conversation with you about that and see what we go from there. One of the things that we did last March, I guess it's about just over a year ago, was the first annual Indian Father Involvement Conference. And so it's in partnership with the Family Resource Program Canada. And, we're looking at hopefully offering another conference next year, so that would be something that just another opportunity to pull folks together, international scene. We are looking for people to come on board, so please get in touch with us if that's something you are interested in.
Great, thanks, Brian. So want to turn the mic back over to Tanis at the Saskatchewan Prevention Institute. Tanis, any questions that have come up over the discussion time that you want to throw our way?
Okay, yes, I'll just take a few of them. So one of them is, you answered it, because one of the questions was, do you have resources for women working with men? And yes, we get that resource out to folks. You can email Jeff for that resource, or Brian possibly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right.
The question is, are there any research papers on immigrant dads? First.
Yeah, I think there's quite a bit that's starting to come out before, and it's a website called FIRA, FIRA.ca. A place to start for some of the research on different clusters of fathers, different types of dads. There was Canadian research done probably 5 or 6 years ago now, and they looked at immigrant dads and new dads, young dads, gay dads, Aboriginal dads, single dads, and dads with kids with special needs. So they did some research around those different clusters, so there'd be some good connections there for immigrant fathers and looking at that. But it definitely is something that's significant, and I think actually we need to look at those a lot. There's the research out of the University of Calgary that's going on for a number of years, so that'd be a place to connect with as well.
Okay, well, thank you. At this point, that is all the questions there are. So, Jeff, Brian, do you have any other?
No big wise thoughts other than we're really grateful that that you gave up your time to be part of this. I know we were talking back in let's see, number about work being overrated. There's a lot of investments that you can make in life, whether it's in mutual funds or the stock market or in housing or whatnot. Some of the best investments that pay the biggest dividends are when we invest time in our children, and that's really what is today. For you dads that are on here taking time out of your day to spend an hour and a half with us, man, that is one of the best investments you can make that will pay the most dividends. investing in being the best dad you can be, investing in the life of your child. And for those of you that are practitioners that took time out of your day, I know there's all sorts of stuff all over your desk. Call your attention, and yet you were here. Thank you. Smart investment.
Mm-hmm. And I echo those sentiments. Great, Jeff.
Okay. I want to thank everyone. Jeff and Brian, you did an excellent job, so thank you for facilitating the webinar. I'd like to thank everyone who participated in the webinar and invite you to stay in touch with Dad Central Canada by going to the website or finding us on Facebook, Twitter. There's lots of stuff going on today with Dad Central Canada on Twitter, so hope some of you are following us. And as I think I mentioned earlier, we are recording this webinar, so it will be found same as I haven't asked Brian, but maybe it could go on the Dad Central Canada website.
Yes, we could put it there for sure.
And I think for those who represent all the provinces, we could most likely send it out to our contacts. So I thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
Great.
Thank you, Tannis. Bye, everybody.
Bye.